What's up? What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Thanks so much for listening and downloading and following, subscribing, whatever you do. I'm your host, Neil Horowitz. You can find me on Twitter at NJ8287, also on LinkedIn, where I post more content. Not quite too active on Threads yet, but maybe in the future. And of course, follow the podcast on your preferred podcast platform. Just an awesome show for you guys today. I was so psyched to book this guest. Kind of fanboying out and also just learning a ton as well. My guest on the podcast today is Bobak. You will know what he works on. He is one of the editors and moderators for the RCFB subreddit. That's college football, RCFB, the internet's biggest tailgate. And also he is one of the people behind the @Reddit CFB Twitter account, which is a tremendous account. Huge platforms. The subreddit has over 2 million subscribers. The Twitter account has over 330,000 followers. Just a ton of good insight here from Bobak about what goes into running such a massive Reddit, a massive subreddit, how the moderators work together, how they go about thinking about developing the voice and the brand, and how they run the business side of things as well. You'll learn a bit about the legal side of it. Bobak is a lawyer by trade, so you'll hear about how he works with an LLC and nonprofit to try to maximize what RCFB can do. Just so much good info and insight on one of the coolest, greatest platforms out there. If you are any sort of college football fan or just sports fan, sports social media fan, you will really, really enjoy this podcast. So listen up. Here is my chat with Bobak of RCFB. Right back with today's guest, and I am so psyched. I feel like we're good buddies already. I hope it stays that way. I'm so psyched to pick his brain. My guest on the podcast today is Bobak. He is moderator, creator, and sports editor of Reddit's college football subreddit, RCFB, and also runs the Reddit CFB on Twitter/X. Welcome to the podcast today, Bobak.
Thanks, Neil. It's great to be here. I love college football. I love talking the nitty-gritty of how things get run because it's fascinating to me, and I know it's fascinating to you. So I'm looking forward to being part of this.
Hell yeah. I mean, college football fans are unlike any other. If you've ever listened to the Fine Bomb show or been on the RCFB subreddit, you know how crazy it is, and you guys do a great job of bringing it all together, fostering it all. So I'm anxious to learn from you today. But before we get into the meat of our discussion, Bobak, tell us about you. Tell us about how you got into this crazy space, what you do as a day job as well, and just your background and any tips for folks that want to try to do what you do.
Yeah. So my background in all of this, I kind of, like a lot of people, when you get in something, when it isn't your direct profession, they kind of stumble into it. So I would say I stumbled into even being a college football fan because I went to a small Catholic high school in Bakersfield, California. I was a theater guy. I did debate, but I always would occasionally go to like a football game if there were a dance or something after like homecoming. But for college, I go to University of Southern California down in Los Angeles, USC. Again, I'm a good sport. I decided I'd go to the first football game. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know who the opponent was. I'd never even heard of the university. It was 1997. It was Florida State. They came into the Coliseum, and it was a close game, and I was hooked after that because the environment, the experience, the pageantry, I loved every second of it. So at that point, I'm like, oh, football's kind of interesting. I have a decent enough build. I'm 6'1" and 200 when I'm slim. And I'm like, at that point, though, you're not walking onto a football team at USC. Right. You're just not. At that point, I'm like, all right, I guess I'm consigned to being a fan. And over the years, and I'm now, 44, so it's been quite a few years. I ended up going to grad school here in Minnesota, where I now live, and have a family, have kids. And when I had a first newborn, I remember I'd be up really late at night, just kind of watching TV while my wife and I would sleep in shifts. Like I'd have the kid for the first half of the night, and then she'd wake up early, and that would work out because I'm a night owl. And a lot of times it was like my kid was born right in the middle of like college football being on almost every day of the week. So, it was in November. So I'm watching midweek Maction and with a newborn sleeping on me. And then I'm like, I enjoyed it, but I'm like, oh, it would be fun to like look up some conversations on it. And over the years, I participated in some sports media forums. So I run into what was RCFB, the college football section on Reddit. And I decided, let's make funny comments. It was a smaller community then, about 30,000, maybe a little less. And still a lot of people. And it was fun to be part of that. And over time, I think the people there noticed, I'm a responsible person. I'm an attorney by training. I ran a fun little nonprofit, not nonprofit at the time. It was just hey, let's gather some money and buy a brick at the stadium they're building for Baylor. So we pulled our money, we bought a brick at Baylor's Stadium, McLean Stadium, and that was neat. And then somebody just said, hey, why don't you just join the team and be one of the moderators? And I've been a moderator on a website before. I've done it since around 2000, so it wasn't anything new to me. I knew how much time it took. I knew that I already have a career. I have kids. I know exactly what my time commitment is for everything. So I know how to set time apart for things, and I know exactly, because that's always a fear. If you get into something like that, you don't want to overcommit and then find you can't actually do it. So that's how I got into it. That was 2013, and it's scary to me. So I've been a part of this, at least in some capacity, moderating, creating, because when I got to be there for a longer period of time, after a few years, you get thinking, especially if you're further on in your career, you've seen how the system works, not just in football but in life. I thought there's more we could do here, and we've always had a good team of people, and we're lucky because it's easy for a website not to have a good group of people, especially when it's a group of people volunteering to moderate something. But we were fortunate, and we had people from various walks of life who were professionals as well. Not just like your typical internet professional, like not like just computer people, but we had people who were working in business, in marketing, in areas, and some with former experience in press, like some of those guys have been producers on Sirius XM at one point or another. So we were able to kind of put together ideas like, why don't we go into media? I think we could do it. People always want to come to us and do what's called an AMA and ask me anything, which is like a Q&A for people in the sport. So I said, well, they already come to us like we're a place to talk to people. Why don't we see if we can start covering media? So in 2015, we kind of expanded from there. I'm getting really into the weeds on this, and I apologize. And then from there, it just kept growing. And so we keep adding things here and there. I don't know if it's a culmination, but last year I straight up had to form, we were able to form an LLC. And it was not because we wanted to form an LLC. We actually formed a 501c3, a nonprofit organization. And we were shocked. We got it approved in 60 days by the IRS. That is really quick. Usually it's years if they have a problem with you. And we're like, boy, oh boy. Hi, we're a group of people on the internet who run a college football forum. We want to form a 501c3 nonprofit and have them not pay taxes to the IRS. Yeah, sure. And I'm like, we must have found a college football fan who follows us. All right, But the going back to the LLC, and this is the fact that I'm a lawyer that this comes up. We had to do two organizations because part of the money that was coming in is we were being asked to run ads on our Twitter account. And I'm like, cool, but there's no way I can say that is for the purpose of a nonprofit. And that's where the IRS would care. So we pull in the money, we'll pay taxes on it in the LLC, and then donate the rest of it right into the nonprofit. And therefore, it isn't too much in taxes, because then we're actually writing off literally everything else because we're donating it to the LLC. So it was what we did, and it was just funny to do it because it got to the point where when we were doing sort of a nonprofit charitable work, it would be like one of us would just collect the money and then donate it and show our receipts, which is cool. But if you suddenly get I can't say like, why am I receiving a $15,000 check from DraftKings or something like that? Like, I don't know, IRS, why would I be receiving that? It's not part of my income. I couldn't do that. So at that point, like, we got to do this legitimately. Yeah. Getting a little that this could be problematic. So yeah.
So you get into, you ask to be one of the moderators. At that point, like, what is it like to be sort of quote unquote like onboarded? What was our CFB at that point? Like, what do they tell you that they wanted it to be? And to a lesser extent too, I want to know, like, well, let's get into that first, and then we'll go into the brand of RCFB in general and who you guys attract, because we have so much to talk about today, Bobak.
Oh yeah. So when I arrived there, the question kind of is, it was a lot more informal at that time, because now we've decided to create structure. We onboard people in a process that helps them figure out what they're getting into. We can't do an open application because we get thousands of applications, and you deal with work hours. It just, especially as a volunteer, it's unreasonable. So we kind of will look at people who might be quality members who seem like they would like to be a policeman, so to speak. So that goes back to what it was like for me when I arrived. I know the moderator who unilaterally decided to make me a moderator, to the chagrin of some of the others, because at the time, the way the team was managed was a lot more loosey-goosey. And I'm not saying it has to feel like a work, but it was the summertime. And it was so funny. It happened on July 4th, 2013. And I know that not only because it's Independence Day, but because traffic-wise, that is the day our traffic just plummets for one day and then goes right back up. I don't know why everyone just wants to hang out with family, go fireworks, barbecue. I don't blame them. But July 4th is always the worst day. So July 4th, I think he's like, no one else is around. It's just me. I think something had happened in college football. So July 4th suddenly was a hot day. So he's like, oh gosh, it's just me. I need help. That guy, I know he's a steady person. I know somebody handed him several people handed me, a couple $1,000 and he donated it and it was not a problem. I'm going to ask him. I'm not even going to ask him. I'm just going to press the button. So I log into the website. I'm like, oh, I'm a moderator now. Because they used to have like an application process and it would be like open application. So they'd say like, oh my gosh, we got 700 applications and blah, blah, blah. So I figured it out on the fly. I mean, you kind of ideally, originally, the way you would moderate any site is you run it the way you would like to see it. And the idea is hopefully you have a good sense of what is right and what is wrong with some easier macro level things that everyone has to worry about on Reddit. Like you can't allow certain material or certain behavior. And some places are more forgiving of like trollish behavior. And that's a trick with college sports or any sports. Trash talk is a part of it. I mean,
you're not a bug.
That line is very difficult to sometimes draw. I mean, 95% of the stuff is okay, but there's always that stuff where you're like, not quite. Oh, you don't call someone you don't use racial epithets. You don't go that way with somebody or any other version of that. You don't start calling somebody a sexual deviant or something like that. There's some things you don't do. But then there's the stuff that's kind of like that line. And then for me as a lawyer, that's what we deal with, right? It's like, you stick your thumb out, kind of eyeball the problem, boom, and you go that. But I think for some moderators, that's a little harder to do. They like certainty. It's like a programmer. You either write the code that works or it doesn't work. With us, lawyers, we live in the world of indecision. I'm an adjunct actually at the University of Minnesota. So I teach, I've taught people for, 13 years now. And you get used to, the idea of the profession is to deal with uncertainty and how to deal with novel situations. So as we got bigger, because now we've got 2.1 million subscribers. When I started, there were less than around 30,000. So you have to start creating a system that can be easy to follow for people who are enforcing it. Because our moderator team isn't that much bigger. It's active, and we can get to that in a later part of this conversation, but we maintain a very active team. But you have to create more structure to it. You have to come up with ways of like, as these things are flowing in, what call do you make? So that's always been part of the struggle of the real meat of being a moderator, which is dealing with content questions. And frankly, we are actually pretty good about making sure that, because it's so, if you don't moderate a website at all, you have total chaos. And with a college football section, one of the weird things that we get, which isn't like involving offensive material, is everybody's going to try and post the same story as soon as it happens. Like, oh, Dion beat TCU. We're going to get 900 articles just giving recaps from different websites, or maybe the same website, but with a different URL because I got the mobile site. And, like, all right, one's enough. We can talk about it here. It's that kind of thing. Does it add to the conversation? Then maybe we'll allow another one in. But it's to also manage what I know most users would like, what we learn, because we sometimes will send out surveys. Users want to have, and what they like about our CFB is a variety of stories, and including kind of the squirrely ones that people hadn't thought of or heard of, like involving either like a wacky thing at a minor school or just some kind of aspect. And then you trust, because Reddit, one of the nature I should have pointed out is that people can upvote and downvote content. What does that mean? It means that it can push some conversations down and some up based on the interests of the people reading. Ideally, the things that are really interesting get upvoted a lot, so they just leap to the top, both in the comment sections, which can be very amusing, or in the topic selection on the website. So to some extent, you trust the users to vote. You have to trust them to come up with, like, it's like a democracy. It's like, it's not perfect, but you got to kind of trust it. You got to trust in the system. But at the same time, we have to play a more parental role. And again, I'm really belaboring this and making it academic. But from a legal analogy, that's what the judge's role is. The judge has to say, is this case enough to move forward to a jury? Is this enough where we've stated something that is a question that the law provides a remedy? And it's almost like it doesn't quite that mind intensive to be a moderator, but sometimes you have to say, like, is this enough to be worth its own post? Is this enough to be its own post? And then if not, you up, if not down. And then if people go completely beyond the rules in terms of attacking each other or doing other things like spamming, then those are easy ones to just strike out. But it isn't too bad, but that's the gist of what core moderating. When I jumped on, that's the gist of it. It's you just had to sort through all of that stuff.
Was there like a quote unquote like org chart? Is there like a head honcho moderator that is a tiebreaker? Like, is that you?
Oh, well, it's funny how it works on Reddit. It's because they didn't really think it through entirely, and I don't blame them because Reddit originally didn't have subreddits. It was just one big feed, one big feed. You know, when it formed around 2005 or 7, I can't remember. So they added sections, and then when they added sections, they added moderators who weren't employees of Reddit. And so the only way the system worked is the first person to claim it became the number one moderator, and then they're the only person that can remove the moderators, below them on the ranking. Now, a lot of times people get bored, they stop, or they delete their Reddit account. So that isn't always the founder at the top. With our section, our CFB, there was, when I got there, a guy who had reclaimed what had come an abandoned subreddit because someone had claimed it early on in the gold rush, never used it, deleted his account, or I think just let go of it. So then another gentleman, I know his real name, but he only likes to use his username, Blue Boy Bob. He had the site, he had the section, and so we were all beholden to him. And then he eventually just got his work got really serious, so he decided to stop being a moderator. And then later he came back on, so then he actually came out below all of us. So actually, any of us could have removed him, and then he had to take another break for work related reasons, but. It was kind of interesting. So that is something where there has to be a level of trust that because Reddit is not a homogenous website. Some of the subreddits are run terribly. Some of them are run really well. Some of them are run in this murky space in between. I would say 99.5% are run as whatever, and then there's the extremes on that. So a lot of the times when there is drama, Reddit's so big, there's an entire section called subreddit drama, which is like, oh, here's the latest thing that happened in some random section you've never heard of. And it's always fun because if it's like some hobby you don't care about, like people who really like some really specific thing that you didn't even know was a hobby, and they're getting into a fight, you're like, all right, this is great. But a lot of times the moderators might get into a fight, and that's what'll end up being the tiebreaker. The guy who's the man or woman who's on the highest spot can kick off everyone below it. And if you don't have a good working relationship and you don't have professional people, that can be a nightmare. The other flip side of that is sometimes somebody quits Reddit but doesn't delete their account, doesn't remove themselves. So you have a account that has no activity, nothing on the top. And once in a blue moon, you'd hear about subreddits where that person would come back and realize, like, this isn't how I meant this community to look like, and start changing a culture that had now, like, maybe established over years, and they start attacking it. So it's silly. We're lucky at RCFB in that when we've had a need to change the top, people have been like, you're right. I think I've been here too long and I'm not really active. And you were all really, at this point, everyone in our hierarchy is serious about it. So it's me and Sir Gippy. That's his username. At this point, we all know each other. We all know each other in real life. Like, we don't like hang out necessarily because we're all over. We're distributed across the country. We were remote. We were working from home before it was cool. But at the same time, we know most everybody on the site, especially the people that do this kind of stuff. And that makes it a more significant entity. And also, here's where it's funny. Over time, we actually had to create a hierarchy within ourselves where there's an executive committee where, there's, and because any one of us who's higher up could easily just decide to be an autocrat. The option is there. Like, the top moderator could easily just say, you're all doing whatever I say, and if you don't want, poof, you're all out, new slate. But we've always had that level of trying to keep some sort of level of equality between all of us with some respect for seniority and understanding. So then we created an executive committee of more senior moderators who always end up making the bigger decisions, like, should we move forward and make an LLC? Should we move forward and make that? So we're not forcing, because you might have up to 20 or 30 moderators. That can be onerous to try and get everyone on the same page. And also, sometimes you need to move quickly. So that was where some of that went.
So take me a little bit inside of what is the RCFB brand? Like, I think of college football, it's so, like, there are fans who are just fans of their school, just want to go talk about I just want to go on a Michigan board, or there are fans who are just fans of the SEC, like the Feinbaum crowd, who's like, I just want to go talk about whether Florida's going to beat Tennessee this weekend, or whatever it might be. But like, who are you guys trying to cater to, and ultimately, why do fans come to you and not to their individual school or conference, communities or boards?
Oh, that second one's going to be. I'm going to start with that second part because that's the easiest one. There are fan boards, specific team fan boards, have been around since the internet began. They have their own peculiarities oftentimes. It's a very concentrated community, and they you sometimes see feedback loops. I mean, I remember when I was very active because I'm an undergrad alumnus of the University of Southern California, USC. So I'd go on one USC fan board, and one of the more popular ones. And there would always be a joke that people were either like, always raining sadness and doom on the team. And this is when they were incredible. This is when Pete Carroll was at his peak. Or there'd be the so-called, and I loved it, this term, they called them sunshine pumpers, that were like, everything's great. Coach said things are good, even though half our defensive line just got injured in the last game. We're going to be awesome next week, And sometimes you get irrational views and it becomes a echo chamber. And that echo chamber feedback loop it can be an issue. And frankly, sometimes you're like, these people, like, I'm a fan, but you all sound crazy, kind of starts to you make me feel better about my college fandom. So when our CFB did something that's hard to do, which is have a college football website that caters to all fans and can keep the peace. I always joke we have a little easier time than our NFL or the Major League Baseball or the pro ones, because there's only X number of NBA teams. So those fractions can get pretty onerous with each other. And to be fair, I think they all have a good community, at least in their comment sections for sure. But so with us, it's like we've got over 130 FBS teams and way more if you count the people that come and they're still interested in college football, but their primary affiliation might be a smaller school. So you're dealing with the fact that they're all these rival groups and mostly just trying to keep them from getting too virulent with each other. And I think people like that. They like hearing from other fan bases. They like hearing news. That's how I started this. Like at work, I would wake up, I get to work. If I had a couple of minutes, I might read what a couple of these news aggregator sites were putting on. Usually there'd be blogs, and they were good, but most of those started to fall by the wayside or pivoted to video or some nonsense like that. I used to love Spencer Hall's original site when he was Every Day Should Be Saturday, because he did both commentary and link, and he became part of SB Nation, and now he's obviously moved on to other things. But when it was just his site, that was like one of my go-tos, that ESPN and SI, just to see what the latest news was. So for me, RCFB, and I think for a lot of people, RCFB offers that kind of like, here's all the news items that are kind of hot right now. Oh, but the fun thing is, here's a community of people that love to make, usually jokes or interesting commentary, and sometimes worthless commentary, but that's what the voting arrows are for. So it's that opportunity to be part of it. And that kind of builds into what RCFB is about, because we actually decided as we were getting bigger, we crafted a mission statement. We actually took a while on this. We actually went through the whole shebang of how we want to do it. And so our official mission statement is we're a welcoming community that celebrates fun, camaraderie, and creativity in all of college football, because that is what we're really about. Because we're never going to be ESPN in terms of a news source. It's just impossible. We don't have that. And even they can't quite keep that up anymore. As we hear with the business news there. So what we try to do is, what we found our strength is a community and the users that come to us. And what makes them useful is that people bond over the sport. Sport is beyond politics. It's beyond this. It's joyous. It's fun. And if you hopefully have a healthy relationship with it, ultimately it's silly and frivolous. It's, and your team loses, all right, but your health is still there. You're still got a roof over your head, things like that. And so it's about kind of pushing that. And some of the creative stuff that the users do, especially when they're being silly, they make a post, which is really elaborate. Like, here's why, I'm going to make one up because I don't want to say, like, here's why when so-and-so, actually, no, the one that people love to use is when Ole Miss, I should say, lost the Egg Bowl because their player did pretended like he was a dog urinating, and they ended up getting pushed back. They missed the kick and lose the game. Like, they're like, oh, here's all the people that got fired because of that one incident. And the funny thing is, sometimes one of our users will come up with a story, and then suspiciously the next season we'll see like a cute thing on game day or something like that. I'm like, oh wow, somebody went with the Surrender Cobra idea. That wasn't our, but the Surrender Cobra was actually one of the I think, I forgot her name, but she's a great writer. She's actually associated with, she used to be part of the SB Nation kind of crowd and is friends with it. But people were running with that, got really popular on our CFB as well as on our Twitter account, because we got really good at screenshotting, the Surrender Cobra, the person with their hands over their heads during games, and people were loving it. And then I think because we were fortunate in our Twitter account, we'll have to get to that in later conversation. That became our greatest sort of introduction to most of the rest of the sports media, because Reddit tends to be a little insular. Well, Twitter/X, okay, X gonna give it to you. Like here on X is a bit bigger, and it really allowed us to plug into the wider college sports community in a way that they found palatable, or in a way they understood. I said palatable is wrong. It's like Reddit's not hostile, and that's not that part, not the college football part. But I mean, it's it was an opportunity to be kind of a welcome mat.
Yeah, and Twitter is ultimately too where the journalists are, and that are going to amplify it too. And then when they amplify it, then it gets to their followers who amplify it further, and it just has that virality effect and discovery effect, more easily than Reddit does, where it's a little more intentional. You either you go to Reddit, you go to the RCFB, you subscribe, whatever as well. But I guess you hit on some interesting topics there too, around just the type of, I guess, attitude, personality, like the kind of I don't want to call it memes, but it's like the culture, it's the tropes, I guess is a good word for it, perhaps. It's not like you're not talking about what Kendall Briles is doing as the OC now, or is Dabo Swinney losing his touch. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of that, but it's more like the funny side of things. And it's like, do you think of it as like this is a place where you go and celebrate the culture, the sport, the fun storylines, as opposed to like getting involved in like the X's and O's and what the money lines are for this game, that game? How do you balance that so that it's palatable for, I guess, is the idea to be palatable for as many fans as possible, as opposed to, I don't know, what's going to drive the most conversation, what people are upvoting the most? Like, there's so many variables there at play.
It's interesting because to some extent we don't do too much in terms of we don't need to do too much in terms of shaping conversation. You can usually trust the user base to pick what they're into, because you want them to pick things they like. And sometimes we'll even create a weekly automated post if people demand it. Like we used to have, like, let's talk gambling, let's talk betting lines. We used to have that for a couple of seasons, and then it just sort of petered out. And when we realized no one was really commenting on that post anymore, we got rid of it. And then, so you're always kind of like saying, what are people wanting to have? People love, for example, it's Thursday and I haven't had a chance to look at it, but Thursday when we're recording this, that would be Trash Talk Thursday, which we started years ago. It's one of the earliest weekly posts. People have to type in all caps. In fact, we actually made it so that if you don't, after a couple of minutes, the system will make it look like you're in all caps, and people will get mad at each other for whispering. But the idea is you're supposed to make fun of your opponent and have fun doing it. And people get really creative with that. But that said, serious discussion. We have a serious discussion post. We actually created it because some people were like, look, I know this is funny, but I'd like to also talk college football, and we want them to. But sometimes you're dealing, and that's the trick. Like, you don't want the lowest common denominator to totally take over. Yeah. And sometimes it can, especially if it just becomes every reply is a variation of a meme. Then you're just sort of like, are we even talking anymore? This is more like, I recognize this. It's like, well, okay, cool.
Right? Fine line, because that stuff drives engagement, I'm sure, as well, even though it's quote unquote like cheap engagement.
Yeah, so the trick is, like, we sometimes will have to draw a line on certain lowest common denominator where it's just becoming impossible to get anything done. Mm-hmm. But fortunately, and again, there's only so much we as people that manage this site can claim. It's the users that tend to come up with to keep things, I think, balanced, without it going too far in one direction. So usually, maybe in a conversation, because again, if you're unfamiliar with Reddit, if you're listening to this, there's the post and then there's the comments underneath. So for a sports section of Reddit, and this is common across all the major sports, there will be a game thread. What does that mean? It means like there's a post, the top information is just like, here's the basic information about the game that's going to take place. And then everybody is just commenting in the post. It's like sometimes in a small game, you might get a couple of hundred comments over a game. In a really big game, you're dealing with tens and tens of thousands of comments. And quite frankly, we usually have to split them by the halftime so that there's another, thread with and the national championship. We straight up have to do quarters. It's impossible because the system starts to. Reddit wasn't designed originally to have a comment section that's got 40,000 comments, in a short period of time. So we sometimes deal with that, and people love to comment in those. And now the one that I think gets the best conversation is a post-game thread, because once the game goes final, a score, we have an automated system that will download the score and post up, here's a game that just happened, here's a score, and people are ready. Some people, I swear, have been sitting back as the game's going on and like, I know what I'm going to write in the post-game. I'll write something and like happily hitting F5 over and over and over again. The moment it appears, Control V or, paste or whatever they're using to do it. And poof, they've got their commentary. Sometimes it's serious, sometimes it's hilarious, sometimes it's a lot of frustration, I'm going to tell you. But it provokes conversation because the way the comment section works is they're all comment trees based off a top level comment. So maybe one person made a joke, and then the tree that kind of forms off of it is people reply, and people reply to those replies, tend to keep that humor. While someone that's more serious, it might actually then spur off some more serious discussion. Sometimes you'll hear people complain, and I understand it. Like, I can't believe I had to scroll down this far to read like somebody actually making this analysis, which was obvious in the game. The first ones might be like, oh, that's just another, that was just Clemsoning again, or something like that, versus the ones that are like, I really think they had a good defense, but I'm not sure they need to do some tweaks on, whatever issue is running low. I didn't watch that Clemson game where that came up quite a bit. Week 0. Oh, this is Sunday game. But anyway, I do watch. I try to watch some games, but at this point, that's the other flip side of this. If you get really into moderating a website like this, you can't watch as many games as you'd like because you're too busy trying to manage everything. Maybe you'll flip to games a lot, especially endings. Especially if you're running if you're paying more attention to the social media aspect of it, where you want to comment quickly on it. That's still what no one's been able to beat, by the way, is that ability of live commentary that you can do on X. Threads had a chance, but botched it. I still can't believe Threads botched that launch so badly for sports. I mean, they should have had it. And I honestly don't understand that algorithm. I don't. I'll go on and I'm like, okay, neat.
If you're not going to be reverse chronological, like forget about getting sports fans there to live posting a game. It's just you don't need to see like a first quarter comment when it's already second half.
People were already really angry when Twitter added that for you version of your timeline, and I'm like, that was the takeaway. You guys made it only for you, not chronological. Like I remember when for you got sprung on everybody as a surprise, and I remember all the reporters hated it as well and you wouldn't realize it for a few seconds. You're like, wow, I had no idea. Wait, this is 4 hours ago, and. Like, where did this come from? So yeah. Anyway, sorry, I got sidetracked there to the extra.
The fascinating behavior that I often look at too, and what you guys provide on Reddit is that fans ultimately do want that forum to be able to comment in real time. Like what I notice sometimes is like if something big happens for a team or for a game, that fans will often go back to like, especially if they're not on Twitter anymore, they'll go back to Instagram and just see whatever the most recent post is, even if it's completely unrelated to the story they're talking about. They'll use that place to be like, oh no, Aaron Rodgers is hurt, but or whatever it might be as the most like updated story. And it's just like, and just like for you guys, it doesn't matter whatever the official like post link is, or whatever. It's just like, here's the game, go at it. And this is your place, this is your forum to get all your feelings out and to be able to.
You're absolutely right. With a big story, we suddenly get a lot of people will show up. And you can tell as people are finding out about it. You get that initial wave, the people that are really finger on the pulse. They maybe saw that first tweet that came out. And then the people that got the ESPN ping or, something like that. And then suddenly we're like, oh, here comes another wave. Brace for impact. Oh, my goodness. And then you get everyone trying to submit the same story and you have to figure out who is the first and pick the one that like you think is the best reasonable. And then you're going to deal with the nonsense where people are like, oh, you're only picking your friends. You're only picking yourself. Sometimes we have been the first ones to post it because one of us will see it. We have a Slack channel we communicate in and someone's like, oh, this story is going to be a mess to deal with. Why don't one of us and no one's posted it yet. I'll post it. And then, because sometimes we're worried, like, why don't we post it? We'll make sure it's got the most neutral title possible. Because some people are really mad. And you'll say, like, so and so did so and so. And, it'll sound like a lawyer writing their side of a fact pattern. It's not in any way objective. So we'll literally be like, we might say, like, so and so got in trouble for blank, just kind of, and then let people discuss. Don't worry, the passion will come out in the comments. But, they'll be like, oh, I can't believe, well, and you almost want to say, like, you can't get into the weeds and discuss it with everybody. Sometimes, like, the title you were proposing was the most accusatory, like, people would have said, they would have blamed us for allowing it as the title for the conversation, because there's always going to be, especially controversy with a hot team, with a big fan base. They are going to be very sensitive to anything written about their team, and they're going to see any biases they can. And half the time you're like, my brother in Christ, there's 300 teams, 400 teams. Like, there's like, how many college football teams we want to talk all the levels? Like, we don't have the time to have some Machiavellian, or I should say, very kind of Illuminati plan to push X team or hate on B team.
Right. Well, let's talk about it a little bit, because like you guys are not obviously like a business trying to like hitting certain KPIs or whatever our OKRs are for the quarter. But so like, when you think about the goals of RCFB, like, and that can come into play where because it just means more in the SEC, maybe every post will be about Georgia or Alabama or Tennessee or whatever, or Auburn, and that might drive away ACC fans, might drive away fans who like want to see more of a balancing. So that's where the democratic nature of Reddit could almost be like a counter to what you guys are trying to do. So are you guys trying to reach a certain level of diehardness, certain level of avidity, or do you want to try to attract casual fans? Do you want to see that number of subscribers grow a little bit? Do you want to see more unique people get there, going to be posting more as opposed to lurking? Like, what are some of those goals that affect your decision making day to day?
Ideally, you want everyone. We definitely go for a more inclusive and generalist approach to it. We would love to see as much material posted there as possible. But you're right to an extent. The democratic nature of it. And it was interesting. He put out actually a very interesting theory. What happens if all the SEC fans just decide, let's only upvote the SEC content, let's downvote the non-SEC content? Thankfully, that doesn't happen. At this point, there's so many fans of so many different conferences. The big conferences definitely have a large representation on there. So it's really impossible to stack the conversation too much. That said, let's say it's a really hot topic involving a team and that fan base is really sore about it. The comment section might get a little bit biased towards that group because they're the ones paying attention. Because what might happen, the casual fans like, oh, that's a terrible story. I can't believe they did that. Upvote the topic, maybe make a comment, maybe not, and then move on. The fans of that team that feel like they're being wronged are going to be in that comment section. They're going to be the ones clicking through. So sometimes on a micro level in a conversation, you might run into that. But on the totality of the site, in terms of bringing in content, we've always tried to encourage more inclusion, and it's been easy to do that. But you're also swayed by what's popular in the news, the national level news, not necessarily even like, for example, Deion Sanders. Wow. I mean, like I can tell several times in the last year where it's been like, whoa, there's a story, from when he redid the entire roster to when he first took the Colorado job to when he was even at Jackson State. But more recently, watching that game against TCU and then, of course, with Nebraska, like users want to upvote things on Deion Sanders, especially if it biases toward, that's where titles get tricky, because especially if because we allow people to post columns, and columns are all about takes, know what I mean? Yeah. They're takes before there were shows to put them on, or tweets by significant people. Like we don't allow tweet by Joe person who's in your follower group, that is putting up a joke. But again, you got Colin Cowherd or whoever throwing up opinions, and people will latch on to those and upvote those up because they kind of agree with it. At that point, you do run into a problem. Theoretically, the way the Reddit vote is, does this add to the quality of the conversation? That's very academic. It's more like, do you like it or not, is how most people interpret it. Right. So in certain cases, we'll see that cluster, but usually the ebbs and flows with the topic on the national stage. It's like, I love when people are like, oh, you guys are all, this is an agenda being pushed by someone. Like, no, it's just how people are reacting to it. It's hard not to react to it. I mean, I remember being in a press box when a big game happened, and all the reporters were like, I cannot believe that just happened. It's not like we're all like, all right, everybody, hey, all of you various newspaper, internet, and TV reporters, as a group, we're going to now say that team is the one we're only going to talk about. No, everyone, as an objective person, you're like, this is a crazy story. I want to know more about it. I mean, right now, as we're doing this, the big the really terrible story is what's going on with Michigan State and Mel Tucker. I mean, yeah, you have a messy situation like that. That's going to dominate the news because it's a big team. It's so many facts of it are controversial, and so you're going to see more of those topics start to move up to the top. And then probably in a week, it'll get pushed by. Actually, by Saturday, it's almost certainly going to get pushed away because now the new thing is like, what happened this Saturday?
Do you like to see though like more users participating? Like I assume there's probably a group of whatever, a few dozen power users that are always going to be, they're going to have tons of comments every time, or tons of posts. Like, is that something where you see, okay, we have 2.2 million subscribers, whatever the number is as of this moment. Like, our goal is to hopefully get as many of those subscribers to be participants, or does it not matter as much? Like, as long as the conversation's there and we're fine with people lurking, or we're fine with the subscriber number is as it is. Like, our goals aren't necessarily on like road to 5 million subscribers or whatever. Not necessarily like tracking that. Like, what when you think about those items, like, how does that come into play with what you guys are trying to accomplish?
There's some trick because I mean, yeah, you get some users that might qualify as so-called power users who are there all the time, and people kind of start to recognize them. Before I became a moderator, I was one, and then my comments have started just because what time I had to use the internet for casual purposes was moderating, not necessarily typing funny comments. So you get some of that. Now, the classic worry is like, you let them do their thing, unless they start getting once in a blue moon, you'll get someone who starts to think that means they can get away with stuff that no one else can. And then you have to be the jerk, because then you're like, look, in our minds, if somebody's great, wonderful. But if you turn into a jerk, there's literally a pool of over 2 million people that can step up to take your place,
Right.
And we don't, but there are certainly users that you recognize all the time. But that said, and it's amazing, Reddit will occasionally do these, and I don't know if Reddit does it or if people who could draw the API data when you could from Reddit, they would show the top 10 most commented on subreddits on the website. And there's thousands of active subreddits on Reddit, subreddits or sections.
Right.
And RCFB is one of them. During our season, even though we were like ranked in the 300 to 400 range in terms of total subscriber count, because some of them are huge. Some are like 30 million, like the default subreddits, where it's like our pics, where all it is silly pictures. People love that stuff. Oh, cats. I love cats, like, if you want to talk in-depth conversation, probably not there. But but the thing is, we suddenly jumped into like the top 3 of sheer number of comments that are taking place day to day. And I remember whenever somebody would share that kind of a active graphic, a time elapse, there would always be people like, what's RCFB? Usually European. Yeah, what's RCFB? It's like, oh, it's college football. It's a sports subreddit. And to be fair, soccer will come up, especially World Cup. Oh my goodness. The entire world wants to comment there, including Americans suddenly. And, NHL doesn't quite get up there, but NBA, when they're in the finals, is off the chart. NFL is off the chart. MLB during the World Series, so it's kind of, but I don't know how it's specifically us. We punch above our weight, even compared to the other sports subreddits. Maybe it's because so many of us somebody went to college is kind of a harsh statement, but I mean, it's just like it's a part of the culture. It's a part of the, we're used to ranting at each other or making funny comments. So, and to be fair, there's no human way anyone could go through all of them unless you had a staff like Meta has for looking over controversial content. And they're not entirely good at it, so I mean, they're understaffed as it is. So I mean, it's fun to see it happen. But so in terms of, do we want to welcome people commenting? We do, and they certainly do. I am amazed when people want to comment in the game threads, because if they're on the ones that are moving really fast, if it's a game thread with 40,000 comments, every time you hit refresh, your comment's going to be not even on the screen anymore, because it only uploads the top 200. So I mean, like, and you could sort it if you need to, but yeah, it can get pretty bananas.
So I enjoy, like, when I'm watching games on game day, I always have my my X Pro or Twitter tweet deck open, whatever you want to call it. And RCFB is one of my favorite follows. The Reddit at Reddit CFB on Twitter. So you guys obviously at some point made the decision, let's launch this Twitter account. Like, what kind of dictates where you want the brand to go? Like, are other conversations like, hey, should we have a Discord channel? Should we try TikTok? Should we get more active on Instagram? I know you guys have an Instagram and you post there too. Like, what dictates those conversations, and what's it like to launch an account like that and translate the magic of RCFB to these other platforms?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll touch on all of this. So originally, the guy Blue Boy Bob I mentioned very early on, the guy who had sort of founded the Twitter, probably the Reddit subreddit, he thought, well, we should have a Twitter account. And at the time, it was like, I forgot when they founded it, like it was a while ago. It was like 2014. No, more way earlier than that, 2011 or something like that. Okay. And so he just did what he thought might work, which is he made an RSS feed where it was automatically posting topics as they were appearing on Reddit. No one likes accounts like that, but that was kind of the ideas people had early on. So then he decided to start making comments, and just making funny missives or whatever, and that seemed to work. And then when I came on, actually he was desperately looking for someone to help him run that Twitter account. He's like, I sometimes mess up, I sometimes don't say the right thing, and he certainly sometimes didn't say the right thing. Don't look for it. We deleted all of those. We went through all the stuff and we deleted all the ones we're like, oh, So, but I remember, so at one point he did something really, like, for example, he was trying experiments that were cute. At one point, he tweeted so many times during a national championship game. I think it was when Alabama destroyed Notre Dame on national television, that he actually got rate limited by Twitter. Like, he somehow, at the time, Twitter didn't have a high rate limit. Now it has much higher rate limit, but they actually said, like, all right, you've tweeted too much for the last 24 hours, you're done. And like, how? And I was looking at what he was tweeting, and this is before I came aboard. So I come aboard and I'm like, I am going to say, let's try and make this PG. Let's try it, maybe PG-13-ish at times. Yeah. Let's try and highlight things that the users are making, and let's really try and identify what they're doing. So instead of quoting them, let's take a screenshot and show the context of it. And I got really good at dressing up screenshots to look better than they do on Reddit. I always joke, people who see our screenshots go to Reddit expecting Reddit to look the way it does in the Twitter account. No, it doesn't. Because also we use what's called the old view, which is how Reddit originally looked. And a lot of us older people prefer that look. But then we actually, because we have tech people on our mod team that know how to play with the way the system works, that strips out all of the extra buttons. All it is the username, the comment, username, comment looks clean. So I said, let's start doing that. So I started doing that, and through trial and error, you learn that people like it. People like these jokes, because half the time I got good at editorially kind of saying, like, that's a really good joke. Sometimes you say, like, that's a really good joke, but I can't put it on Twitter, or right. Like, for any number of reasons, I don't feel comfortable putting that. It might be, the language might be a little blue, or it might be just not funny if you're not on Reddit. But so we got better at that. And then we started going into, like, let's put some memes and some pictures and funny things and commentary. So nowadays, if we put commentary that's our own, we don't need to put a screenshot or say who's doing it. And then if we're trying to show what people are doing on our website, we'll make sure it's very clear who's writing it, and usually through a screenshot, through a link. And over time, we'd have people who said, hey, can I help with it? And I said, like, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it wasn't just like, yeah, no problem, sign right up. But we found some people were better at it than others. And usually they're self-selective. Not everyone wants to do that kind of stuff. I think it's fun, particularly if you have the time and you have a certain sense of humor. And over time, the humor kind of evolved with the group, and we all fed off of each other. When someone would go too far, it wasn't like, you're stupid, you're out. Like, all right, let's talk this through. We had good faith in everybody. You always assume good faith in your coworkers in this stuff, especially we're not paid workers, but I mean, you want to make it. I have the total control of the Twitter account now, in the sense that when we did a verification. Now, anyone who wants to log on, I unfortunately get the 2FA on my phone, and all that stuff. Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, all right, let's learn from mistakes. And sometimes everyone, we tweet a couple 100 times on a game day, and, many times during the week. Sometimes you have an off tweet that just gets misread by everybody. And we've had a few of those over the years. And I've had other people say, like, well, which guy did it? which person did it? It's like, you
Yeah.
know, we internally know, because usually we have a quieter, like we use Slack for communication, right? So we'll have like a group of us that communicate quietly, and the person will be like, "That was me." It's always been someone who said, "That was me. I didn't realize it was going to go over that way. I didn't read it that way." And we're like, "Hey, man, it's no problem." And there's a certain level of like, time will heal all wounds in that sense, and you have to have that. That in some areas of if air traffic control, okay, you can't make many errors, but in the Twitter account about college football,
Yeah.
got some room there. So, and then ideas like adding Instagram. They were like, "Hey, should we add Instagram?" Sure. Does anyone want to run it? And then it becomes that. And then Discord. We've actually had a Discord before. We had one Discord, and now we've actually switched to another. And that it's so funny. In my entire life, I'm 44. I got on the internet when I went to college in '97. For the life of me, I've never been able to get into chat rooms. I just don't care. I my eyes glaze over. So we have people who are willing to do that, who are willing to be part of that and help run it and keep that moving, because Discord obviously is really popular. I'm not dissing it. It's just, to me, I never was my thing. I prefer refresh. And if I'm going to chat, I prefer really small, like Slack, where it's more like a work communication group. These are the people I know. There's a bit more, we're actually talking about a variety of topics, not just like, whatever. And again, I don't like how I'm even describing Discord. It's a good place. People love it. So TikTok, I remember we even brought it up, and I feel I'm the old man at this point. There's actually there's at least one person much older than me in our group, which made me feel great when we brought him on. I'm like, all right, because when I first joined, there was me and this other moderator, and she actually stepped back because she's a full professor at a university. But she and I were joking because our ages were like, she's like, I was like at the time in my late 30s, and she was in mid 30s, and we had a person on the mod team who was like 19, and we did the math. We're like, woo, spring break 95, like it could have been our kid. Yeah. And at this point, certainly I'm 44. So now that line keeps growing. When somebody who's 20 joins, or even, higher than that. So anyway, so all of that said, gosh, where did I even go with that? So
TikTok's different too, because
I'm the one who's like, "Hey, should we do TikTok?" And they're like, and I'm like, "Look, I'm an old man saying, should we do TikTok? I am very self-aware of how strange that even sounds." And we're like, I don't know if we could pull it out. Our team is like, we would seem so cringe if we tried to do that. And it's something I'd come back and look, maybe we could do this. Maybe it's like, no. They're like, no. And you need to be able to trust people to tell you, like, that's a really bad idea.
Well, TikTok's different too, because it requires, to some degree, a face. And right now, like, there is no face of RCFB. I mean, we're talking, you and me are talking. Obviously, you are one of the faces of RCFB, but no one knows like that Bobak is behind, a lot of the tweets or a lot of the Reddit posts, and I'm sure if you go on TikTok, I'm sure there's a lot of RCFB posts that are being used as like fodder for content on there. So it's interesting to think about, like, again, it goes back to sort of what the goals are as well. Like, if people are using RCFB content on their own TikToks, maybe that's a win, maybe for the site. And it doesn't matter if it's you guys, because you guys aren't trying to, like, become an influencer and do all these brand deals, I guess.
Absolutely. And we always loved, for example, when other Twitter accounts would find our stuff and share it, and like, look what I found on Reddit. Usually they'd say Reddit, not us, RCFB. Right. But yeah, no, that's always a positive. And again, I think it's because we're not operating under a bottom line. We're not trying to make money. We're not trying to do any of that. It's never been our purpose. That it gives us the room to say, like, yeah, fine. That's as long as no one's trying to pretend to be us. That gets tricky. And real funny story, Instagram one point banned our account because they thought we were faking it. They thought we were pretending. And we had to go. It took 2 months to sort it out. Like, no, we really are the RCFB account. Here, like, why don't you reach out before Elon messed it up to the verified Reddit Twitter account and ask them, or go to the RCFB account and send mod mail and see what they say, But yeah, no, that was still one of my favorite when we were banned for impersonating ourselves, which meant we did it too good, I guess.
Let's touch briefly. Just a few minutes left here with Bobak Hayeri. Seriously, I can keep you all day, every day. We can just go till the end of the day, Saturday. What you touched a little bit on, like, there are some revenue streams. Like, I know you guys do sell merch. You talked a little bit earlier about the charitable elements you guys have. So, like, I know there's merch. What other revenue streams are there, if there are any? Where does it go? Like, what else have you guys talked about? advertising relationships, etc.?
That's a great question, and it helps actually kind of talk about how this sort of built out over time. Originally, the idea was let's have some kind of merchandise come in. Let's sell it, brand our merchandise, because we didn't actually have to hire him. There was a guy who was following our CFB who worked for Sahatchi and Sahatchi, which is one of the larger design firms, and he's volunteered to say, like, because we wanted to redo our logo. And we wanted to not use the Reddit alien. We wanted it to be unique so that we could market it. Because as a lawyer, I sent a very polite email message to the admins, like saying, "Do you own, as an intellectual property right, the R slash or the slash R slash that's at the beginning of everything?" They said, "No, we don't. We own the Reddit alien and we own the word Reddit." Perfect. Then I know exactly where my room is on creating. And Reddit historically was actually always very okay with subreddits doing fundraisers using their logo, or people just buying things with their logo on it that were made by the subreddits. I think the only time they got mad is when and they were doing it innocently. I don't mean to say there's anything wrong with the culture, but a gun subreddit made like gun equipment that had the Reddit logo on it, and they were like, no. If that goes wrong, we're really gonna look bad. So I get that. There's a PR element potentially there. But for us, we got rid of the alien. And then we said, does anyone want to design it? This guy's like, I'm a professional designer. I actually would love the opportunity to come up with a logo system where it could be switched to any team. So now the top logo at RCFB is always the number one team in the AP poll. So right now it's the Georgia logo. If you go to old.reddit.com at the very least. So we have every team in the FBS now has their own logo. And so we were like, well, we also have these. Why don't we sell them as stickers? So any money that was coming in for all those years, we had a friendly pick'em contest, pick the winner. And, if you win the championship, the top finishers would get money, and the money would simply be divided from what came in from the merch. It would never be much. It would be like $300 or $400. And so one guy would just handle it. It was never a big deal, supposedly IRS. And so meanwhile, I would always handle the stuff that was being donated to charity. Like, we do a thing where we'd identify we got really big at this. We're like, here's 5 schools that have brick drives where they're trying to charitably raise money. And so we at this point have bricks at like 40 schools across the country, and the Rose Bowl and the College Football Hall of Fame. We actually have 4 at the Rose Bowl and 4 at the College Football Hall of Fame. Actually, though you can't see it, but Neil can see behind me, there's actually bricks where I would get duplicate. Not every school would do a duplicate, but sometimes they would send one, and I would just end up getting it because my name is on everything. So I also get the craziest amount of mail when I moved from my last house, I was hoping they weren't going to forward my mail from all these universities. They must think I went to like 30 universities. They get like Auburn, Alabama, South Carolina, Florida, Colorado State, Rose Bowl. It's bonkers how many of these I was getting. I'm like, North Texas Southern University in Baton Rouge. Like, this guy went to an HBCU, and he went to like this, he went to that. Like, it's comedy how many of these things I get. So setting that aside, eventually when a new revenue stream showed up, because we always knew it would be lovely to form a 501c3. That would be awesome. But I'm an attorney, and I always want to do things the right way. I'm a conservative approach to my legal practice. I'm not a trial attorney. Actually, I'm a more corporate attorney, like, don't reduce risk, CYA, So what happened was, I'm like, I know attorneys who could do this for me, because that's the other thing. I know when I need an attorney. And I know it's going to cost me X thousands of dollars. I'm not going to fundraise. Hi, everybody. Would you donate? Because we need to use it for legal fees. Like, no one's going to do that. So then, by chance, the Twitter account got so big. Because also, we will never advertise on Reddit itself, because that's Reddit's world. That's Reddit ads. Like, if you want to advertise on Reddit, any ad you see on Reddit, you go through Reddit, you pay them. Not our problem. We don't collect any of that. But our Twitter account got so big, we're like, we got people reaching out to us, like, we will do. So it's so funny, as a lawyer, as a contract, I was like, all right, I'll look at the contract. We actually didn't want to do it. We're like, this is going to be people are going to be like, this is nonsense what you guys are doing. You guys are sold out. So we actually told them, like, we won't do this. We won't do that. We won't do this. You go back, because there's a middleman. You go back to your client and tell them, like, if they're okay with all of that, sure. A month passes. We're like, they said, no problem. And then next one, you got it. Here's X sum of money. And we're like, it's as a company, not that much. And for them, nothing. You know what I mean? But for us, we're like, oh wow, this is no longer like I can just, as I said earlier, I can't just pocket this. And that then therein, we're like, okay, now let's take everything we've been doing before and organize it in a way where now we can collect money that comes in through merch that goes directly into an LLC, money that gets donated to the, or party that gets given for an ad on Twitter goes directly in the LLC. And then things can go into the nonprofit and get distributed. And when we raise money for the nonprofit, we just raise it directly in the nonprofit. It goes right into the 501c3. The LLC doesn't even have to touch it at that point. And it's been wonderful because we didn't realize this. When you have a 501c3 for nonprofit purposes only, you get so many great opportunities with some of these websites will waive their fees altogether. Like that used to be the old thing. I'm like, I know you're donating to us, but I just want to let you all know PayPal's going to take X dollars or this. Now, when we're donating right to it, it's wonderful because 100% of the donations go into the bank account without any transaction fee, and then I can send it out without any transaction fee to the recipient.
Was there a point, or is there a point even where you kind of have to have that decision of, this is what we want to be like I mean, it's hard. Do you have to turn off that like grow at all costs capitalist idealism? Like at some point we could license our brand and we can maybe do like a documentary, or then we can do this, or license our brand to a sports book. Or, like if you were going to talk to some like private equity firm, they'd probably have a laundry list of things they want you to do to try to grow multiples and multiples and multiples, because you do have a very engaged community. You do have a very well-known brand now among a very important fan base and a coveted audience. So like, do you have to, did you have those thoughts? Did you have that decision of, we're not going to chase every dollar. We're not, I mean, heck, one of my previous podcast guests, although it's not what he does, he made some money because he quote unquote invented the T-Boing meme, and he made like a website. He made a bunch of T-shirts, and he still gets a few bucks every now and then. So it's taking me through that mindset of like, yes, there's an opportunity there if we really wanted to quote unquote sell out to the nth degree, but we've decided not to.
It's kind of interesting. We've never had to worry too much about it for a couple of reasons. Number one, we grow no matter what. I'm always shocked at how we grow in terms of size, in terms of numbers, particularly on Reddit itself. Twitter, we always feel like we earn our user. We earn our followers. We're very proud of our follower count because we know we've done it organically. And it took, because sometimes some other subreddits would come up to us and say like, oh, we'd like to do a Twitter account too. How did you get to this? And like, we're like, grinding, man. You got to grind. And it took years. And no one wants to hear that. There's no trick, to it. I remember I'm not going to name them, one subreddit clearly started paying for followers. And then one day it plummeted. Yeah. And I guarantee you they didn't do it organized. I guarantee you the person who agreed to run the Twitter account thought that would be the smart thing to do. And no, that's a house not only on straw, that's a house on just embarrassment. But anyway, setting that aside, going to one thing that has kept us also in check, are the restrictions of being a subreddit. No moderator can make money doing moderator work. So none of us can ever accept money. That's why I said like, hey, want to advertise on Reddit? Use Reddit ad. That's the official way to do it. And so in that sense, and then also, I mean, we're dealing with us. You're technically dealing. A lot of people can't look at us as like a separate group. They see Reddit. They see Reddit they know Reddit's a big company, and therefore
they don't separate our CFB as its own brand quite so much.
And in a way, I don't mind it because it keeps us from having to ever worry about being dragged into something. Now, when I think I mentioned to you one time, I was a guest on a podcast that was run by a newspaper group because they wanted to integrate Reddit college football section into it. So they reached out to Reddit. Reddit reached out to us. And then I was the one who was willing to do it because other guys were like, because it was a fun podcast. I liked it. But anyway, so, that was one way to go about it. But then also to an extent, that's a concern. So we know that is in some way keeping us back. So, for example, I was fascinated and I understood why Sickos Committee, they're run very differently than we are. But people have heard of them. They rose pretty fast. It's like at the time, and again, my knowledge of this has been a few years. So they had like 30 or 40 people that just kind of ran this thing. Mm-hmm. And so it was easy to write about them and talk about them because they're their own entity. There's literally it's not like Reddit Sickos Committee or anything like that. So I always thought of it like that is both a plus and a minus. And I'm never going to say I want to be separate from Reddit. That sometimes comes up. Sometimes when Reddit does something really dumb, and certainly it's done a couple of dumb things, not recently, but in the past. I there have been some of the team that would be like, oh, we should just be ready to leave Reddit and start our own thing. And I said, first of all, we're married to this thing if we want to be or not. Like you got to just accept it. You have to accept it. Number two, when we do media events, I mean, a part of it is like, yeah, we're RCFB. We have 2.1 million subscribers and 330,000 followers. But then sometimes they'll see Reddit and that works in our favor because like, oh, I heard about that website. Part of me is also like, what did you hear? But like, which part? Because that's not us. I guarantee you, we're not the part you probably heard about in the New York Times. But at the same time, that there's something to that too. That we're a part of that. We're a community of it. And Reddit, the way they talk about their subreddits is so comical because you can tell they're afraid. And we're not asking to be employees or paid or anything like that. But some of the quarters of Reddit get really angry about that. And so they're always like, it's almost like listening to colleges talk about players. It's like, oh no, we want them to be happy. We'll even figure out some way to compensate them, but you're not employees. I mean, so I would say like, or if they ever got to it, like they're all independent contractors, we're suddenly going to be a gig economy here out in Reddit land. But, so to for us, the way they talk about us is kind of funny. We have all these wonderful independent communities, and then I don't think they use the word quite independent, but they're basically implying that we're all separate islands. And it's true, but yeah, it's the fact that we are tied to Reddit in the way that we are has, in a ways, limited. In a good way. And to be honest with you, and I don't think this is controversial at all, having worked with many people at Reddit over the years, and it's a high change over there. It's a very high turnover because I told you, I've been doing this as a mod for 10 years. I've talked to quite a few people there. And usually when I look up their LinkedIn, they just got out of college or something like that. They'll be like, they'll have no idea what college football is about. They have no idea. They are the big, I hate to use the meme for this, but they are absolutely sports ball. Like when they think of sports, I'm going to be honest, it's endemic with tech. Like Twitter, like when Elon took over Twitter, I was like, if he's smart, he's going to realize that live sports and live events like the Oscars and things like that, that is where Twitter is at its best. I honestly, I guarantee it's an afterthought. The guy was at the damn World Cup final in Qatar, and like he knows sports exist, but and again, I'm not just going to point a finger at him. I think right before we went on the air, I'm like, the one opportunity that Meta had to take out Twitter was with Threads. Threads is useless for sports fans because they only let you go and look at your feed through whatever their algorithm thinks. And I've noticed, by the way, over the last few months, it doesn't work the way they thought they were. It's going to be friendly and uncontroversial. Now, anytime I turn up Threads, I get someone I don't follow, something about politics. And I'm like, this is exactly what you guys said you weren't going to do, except I can't change it. I can't change to the people I'm following at all. Like it's the biggest own goal in the history of sports media. Like was not that they thought they were, because clearly they didn't. And then meanwhile, I'm trying to think of the Reddit's just like that. They honestly don't appreciate the fact that the strongest parts of Reddit that don't have issues with anything that the Facebook, they all have issues with porters that get into hateful or they get into controversial topics, really warp perceptions of their fellow person. The college, the sports subreddits don't. And I mean, we're not necessarily, I don't speak for our NFL, I don't speak for our NBA, but those groups, they run their own ships the way they do. We are what are the best parts, the least controversial parts of these websites, not just Reddit, but Twitter and /X or all the others. And the tech industry just takes it for granted and just knows, oh, they're great. They'll do their thing. Ha ha, sports ball. And it's like, brother, some of us went to real universities too, and we're all smart and we're all this, it's like, I mean, you went to an Ivy League school yourself. It's just like, really? Anyway, I say it and you can see I'm smiling as I'm saying it. It's just like, you kind of just raise your hands and shrug. You're like, God, imagine if they ever appreciated what sports does for the internet, really, what it does for the internet, what it does for conversations. Yes, it can certainly passionate, some amount of vitriol, but with those of us who can control it and corral it, it's a delight. It's what makes it fun. It what keeps us coming back. But
oh yeah. Oh man, Bobak, there's like a half dozen more things I want to get to, but we will get to more in our first and 10 segment coming up. But first episode shareable stat coming at you right now. So good talking to Bobak again. The guy, one of the guys behind our CFB, the Reddit college football, the Twitter account and subreddit. Just so much good stuff. But stick around for more with him with our quick hitting questions segment. But first episode shareable stat. This episode shareable stat comes from really just an excuse for me to talk about this interesting article that was linked up in Matt Navarro's weekly newsletter, all about WhatsApp. The stat that I'll share from this article, a couple of them, I guess. One is 691,000. That's how many followers BBC News has on its WhatsApp channel, and 90%. That is what one of these publishers that was featured in there said is the approximate click-through rate on links they share in their WhatsApp community. WhatsApp channels are getting bigger and bigger, and they are different from communities. You can read more about the nuances online, of course, but the overall concept here is the idea of as we move into these more closer, more private social channels, social networks, whether it's close friends on Instagram, it's iMessage threads, it's DMs, it's WhatsApp threads with friends and family. How can you sort of try to capitalize on this more intimate way of social media? You know, the large platforms, Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, are not going anywhere. You know, Twitter is obviously on its struggles, has its struggles here and there, but the idea of being part of a huge community is something, but to actually engage with a more intimate community is something that we're continuing to see more and more, and that behavior, the platforms are starting to evolve that way, and that's why you see Instagram broadcast channels, that's why you see close friends lists. And now being able to share stories with close friends as well as a recent update on the Instagram channel. But really think about how can a sports team, a sports media platform, a sports league make the most of these WhatsApp communities or WhatsApp channels. You know, a community has a max number of members at 2,000. It might be growing in the future. But you've seen teams try to create Discord channels to create the more intimate connection with fans, and perhaps WhatsApp communities could be a way to go. Whether it's groups of season ticket holders, or maybe you ask fans about their interests and then place them in groups together, and then the team is running them, or maybe a season ticket rep is helping to run them as well, or a PR person, or a social media person, or a group salesperson. Anyone that is willing to raise their hand, but especially those in the fan relations side and the sales side, and of course just general social media, something that can be posted across these communities and allow people to have those more intimate conversations, create more actual real relationships that can form on and offline. And if you start to connect them by their interests, maybe by where they sit, if they're season ticket holders, you can actually create some pretty cool intimate relationships for which the team or league is the glue. So something to really think about here. Again, I'm not going to go too much longer because I've already rambled enough, but the shareable stat, all about WhatsApp. 90% is the one I'll keep you with. That is the approximate click-through rate of links shared. So think about that as well when it comes to making sure that people see what you want to put out there, whether it's an offer or more information about something, or just even a survey of fans as well. Just 90% or hundreds of thousands of followers of these WhatsApp channels, even just looking at those in the UK featured in this article, get you thinking, get you talking, and pondering a little bit. But more importantly, that's the triple stat. You guys stick around because we're going to have some more fun, more insight, more info about RCFB with Bobak of RCFB. Right back from the episode of Shareable Stat, and I'm joined once again by Bobak. He is moderator, creator, and sports editor of RCFB on Reddit, as well as at Reddit CFB on Twitter. Bobak just had so much fun talking to you, shooting the shit, learning from you. Are you now ready for a little first and 10?
Yeah, let's go for it. I'll be quick.
Right. Number one. The loudest or craziest college football fan base throughout RCFB, and also the most intelligent fan base if it's different.
The most crazy fans tend to be SEC, and I'm going to say it changes year to year depending on who is doing the worst unexpectedly. So it might be 1 year might be Texas A&M, 1 year it might be Tennessee, 1 year it might be Alabama. Literally, you could replace any of them. The only team that gets a pass is Vanderbilt because they have no expectations. Now, intelligent. I would say Vanderbilt. I'm not sure, but no, that's a harder one to say. I would say by and large, every fan base or that's going to be a harder one to say because you have to go by the individual there.
I mean, given the way the SEC is looking this year, there's probably a lot of conversation across many schools because no one's happy, I think, except for Georgia.
And you can imagine the Texas A&M fans are especially alarmed after what happened with Miami.
Oh my gosh, they're trying to do a Kickstarter to raise enough money to somehow buy out Jimbo Fisher. Number two, Tell me, we didn't get into like what a college football Saturday looks like for you. I would love to kind of hear a little bit about that. But tell me the most memorable day during your time with the CFB. There's been so many like crazy moments where it's just like, holy shit, the college football world is turning upside down. What's been the most memorable day, whether it's for a game or not non-game, whatever reason it was?
Yeah, I would say that the day that I still remember was when the article came out that oh gosh, the
Manti Te'o.
Nancy Teo. I remember when that came out because that was still early on when I was there. And when that story came out, I'm like, how are we going to deal with this? Because there were so many angles of it. People were legitimately speculating things that were wild, but made sense when you drew the dots. Is he in the closet and he doesn't want to say it? Like, because he's very religious? Like, there were so many angles to it that were like, these are conversations we would never allow people to have about players, but we have to hear because that's the entire essence of it. So that day was wild. That was probably because it's one of the earlier ones and it was one of the sillier stories that I will never forget.
Yeah, after the couple of documentaries came out recently about Manti Te'o as well as Johnny Manziel, people are looking back at that Heisman ceremony with the two of them and Colin Klein. They were like, what was going like Manti Te'o was dealing with his shit that day. Johnny Manziel was dealing with his shit that day. Like, what a crazy like look back at that day, at that moment. Mm-hmm. All right, number 3. This is maybe similar to the first one, but we'll see. The most polarizing team in college football based on Reddit CV, and also the most polarizing coach.
The team right now, I would say the one that is the most controversial is actually doing really well, and it's Texas. The reason is people think they're always overrated, and they're always looking for an opportunity to either boo them and say or jokingly say Texas is back. But after what we just saw with Alabama, no, I actually do think they're back now. But I think because by the time the internet was taking hold, at least in our CFB, it was already a number of years past the 2005 championship. So that's part of it, I would say. Now, coach, at this point, it's Deion Sanders wins by leaps and bounds. Nothing has been like this. Nobody has been like this. Maybe a long time ago, I might have even said Nick Saban, but even then, people had to respect the man because he wins. Right. Deion Sanders has been swinging in every direction because of all the stories that go around him. And I just look at primetime as a coach. I actually have no controversy of him personally whatsoever. I think he's really interesting and I get what he's trying to do. But in terms of driving conversations that swing in extremes, because there were times where I'm like, you guys are just being crazy. Like he's doing his thing. Like, stop making it sound like he's a total moron. He's an educated man and he knows what he's doing. So now it's like, I don't think he's the second coming, guys. I think you're maybe going a little too far here. Let's not necessarily reserve your tickets for NRG Stadium to watch him take on the national championship. But
I mean, just so crazy. Like, if you would have told us last year when Colorado was going 1-11 that in week 2 of college football that Colorado versus Nebraska would do the same number of viewers as Texas, Alabama in prime time, like, good Lord, it's just crazy. What a wild story. Mm-hmm. Number 4, this is an interesting one. Tell me, I'm going to put you in charge of Reddit and then also put you in charge of Twitter. What is one change or addition you would make to Reddit and one change or addition you'd make to Twitter?
Okay, with Reddit, it would be pretty much I would go and create a department that only handles sports, like in promoting sports on the website, because that's a strength, and just streamlining all the little things we have to deal with that go along with that. It would be a multitude of things I would have to go through, and it's none of them are that big of a deal on their own. Mostly it just has to do with structuring the website to not necessarily just be a sports website, but to understand the benefit of sports. Now, with Twitter or X, first of all, I would change the name back. Second of all, oh my gosh, where would we even go? I would return verified to how it worked. This is so stupid what he did. It's absolutely stupid. And I'm going to be honest with you, the way they've structured it now, it ended up being more beneficial to us in the last month and a half because they made it so verified accounts, if you pay for because we didn't pay. And then suddenly they said, if you were verified, you would get a cut of the revenue you generate.
Right.
And then we did the math because they tossed some math out there. I'm not a math guy. Last time I took math, I was a junior in high school. Right. But it worked. We was like, you pay $6 a month and we collect a couple $100 a month. So that's not a bad deal. It's stupid that this happened. We don't need that money, but it goes into the LLC, which therefore will go on to the nonprofit. Right. But I mean, like, really, I get mad because now when a big story, usually not involving culture, like a real story, a real life story comes out, I can't find anything. I don't know who's real or who's not. So that I would turn verified back 100%. And 100% absolutely would benefit from that.
Like it's wild to me when a big thing in college football happens, even and you see some of the athletes from the teams that are posting, you're like, well, that there's no blue check mark. Is that really the quarterback of this team or is it not? Like it's just wild to me that still is a problem and like we gone backwards. All right, number 5, Ray Bobak. Tell me the most viral post from your time at Reddit CFB, whether it was on Twitter or Reddit, or if you want to name each one.
With Reddit, there's a couple, and they were original stuff that were created because those are the things that tend to go beyond commenting on a story. One of which, I did one a long time ago. I'm not going to even talk about it. It was interesting, but I found the predecessor of Bishop Sycamore, back before Bishop Sycamore became in the news. I found a college team that was fake. And I wrote all about it, and then suddenly everyone in college football paid attention to that little thing. The reason it didn't get that big is they were playing only D2 and D3 schools and in AIA schools. So they were kind of on the periphery of it all. But another guy wrote an article that Florida State might not be bowl eligible. That was the title of it. And it was because they had played an FCS. They had 6 wins. 1 win was against an FCS team that actually did not have the correct APR level they needed to be countable. They were too low because over X number of years, they hadn't hit it. So the NCAA said that should not be countable for bowl purposes. It was Delaware State, University in Delaware. The problem is it came down to we had to do a Freedom of Information Act request, and they denied it because they were hiding that data, which should be public data, in a private entity associated with the athletic department. And we don't now, I believe they would have lost a challenge, but we don't have a budget for that. I can't go hire some lawyers to go force that through. So I'm convinced that was it. So that became and then honestly, there was a year later echo. Florida State had only 5 wins the following year. So the same people posted Florida State might not be bowl eligible this year. Because that previous year, you can imagine the Florida State fans had some serious problems with that statement. Because we were just saying, your bowl streak should have ended right now. This should be the year your bowl streak ends. And the thing was, a few real reporters, not real reporters, but legitimate people went with it because we explained them the data. We were actually privately asking someone, does this make sense to you? Because we know them well enough now that we could ask them, yeah, this all makes sense. So we ran with it, and I told the guy, I'm like, you're going to be the front page of this if this goes wrong. And then, so then in a year later, they ended up not being bowl eligible anyway. But that was probably the most viral moment on there. Now on Twitter, that's a tricky one. We've had a few. Sometimes they have nothing to do with the with RCFB, with college football. One of our guys made a joke about an NFL. I think was it when Urban Meyer got caught in a bar with that? We made a tweet that ended up being an international sensation, and it was from us. We're like, whoops. Not whoops, but you don't expect that. Sometimes, off season you make, or during the NFL year, you might make some comments about the NFL or other sports. I mean, we had a comment, not it wasn't off color, but about the Qatar getting mowed down in the first rounds of the World Cup. And that ended up being internationally, that ended up as an international viral sensation. And we were just kind of like, what? But it's a bigger audience. It's a bigger audience. College football is still big, but there's things that are bigger than it.
Yeah, totally. We had to do a part 2 and go into the original reporting and game coverage you guys have started to do a little bit too of going to games, being in the press box is a whole other element that we didn't get to hit on. This will be a fun one though for you. That's kind of in that realm. Tell me, what would your dream AMA be for the RCFB subreddit, and also what's been the best AMA so far in your time there?
Ooh, we've had over 150, maybe even 200 AMAs over the years, so that's going to be a toughie. But in terms of who I would love to get, there's some people I've reached out to, and they for reasons either they can't do it or we haven't been able to. They just never answer. I would love to have a coach like a Nick Saban, but also I should clarify, I don't know how he would be as a guest. So Deion Sanders would be actually amazing right now, not because he'd drive traffic. I agree he would. That would be. I remember when we had Cliff Kingsbury when he was just starting out and he was really hot at Texas Tech, not and literally, but also just as a commodity. I remember that AMA because long story short, we had sent him a DM just on a whim and said, "Would you like to do one?" And he said, "Sure." We never heard back from him, so we figured, okay, he forgot, no problem. We know we didn't take it personally. So then one day I'm driving in the Twin Cities here in Minnesota, and I get a call, and it's this sweet lady from Texas. She has a drawl and everything. I'm trying to put this AMA up, and it says I have been banned. And I realized, first of all, she didn't know anything about Reddit. She found our AMA, which is just for AMAs, just for people doing Q&As. So they didn't know who this was, and they were like, well, it's just a random person trying to, sports ball, blah blah blah. Like they banned. So then we're like, no, come to this section, and then I have to park my car, and I'm like, I had to warn everybody, like, we're about to have an AMA with Cliff Kingsbury. I'm just warning you right now. I had no idea this was coming. I sent out a tweet. I literally sent out a tweet. Cliff Kingsbury's about to do an AMA in 10 minutes. This is real. Like that's literally how, because usually we would announce it, go through a process of promoting it. So that was it was a huge number of people showed up for that one. That was before, because Reddit over the years has tweaked how people use it. So it's harder to get people to necessarily go to an AMA like it used to be, because they're usually on mobile phone or whatever. But in those days, that was still at the height of when people used desktop. I still couldn't believe how crazy that got. That got so crazy so fast. It was like, even though no warning and 10 minutes on Twitter warning, it was thousands of comments almost immediately. I would never had one like that before or since. And it's because it was him. So Dion would probably be the only other coach, I think, at this point that could generate that kind of hype.
Yeah, that's a hell of a story, man. That's amazing. All right, tell me number 7. This is be a fun one actually as well. Past or present, your favorite just college football character. Like we have so many characters throughout the sport, coach or player, executive, whatever you want to be. Like who's that one that sticks out in your mind, past or present?
Oh, that's a great one. I mean, I'm going to be a homer here. I always liked Pete Carroll. I liked his attitude. I liked his motivation. I still remember when he was asked in an in an ESPN interview, they clearly tacked it on at the end just to see what he would say. If you weren't a college football coach, what would you do? I'd be an archaeologist. Like, he didn't even think. and everyone was like, what? So I mean, that kind of, and there was a really good article when he was at USC that was written, I can't remember if it was for LA Magazine or what, but it was like titled like 30 reasons why a profile of Pete Carroll won't appear in this magazine. Because the gist of that art, probably the sense of that title was he got too close to his subject. He immediately got disarmed by this guy, and he was like, this is actually like my buddy now. I feel weird writing this. But if you read the story, you see what he's actually apparently like all the time. And he was exactly what he was like what people were doing on TV. So it was a very entertaining article. So I'm going to go homer take on that one.
No, I'll take it. That's a good one. All right, number 8. Time for our food question. I always ask a food question. Tell me the best meal you've had in any college football town. What was it? Where'd you get it?
Should I cheat and say like New Orleans because the food is so good there? But I think if we're talking about just a basic tailgate food, I think the thing that I fell in love with moving out to the Midwest was a brat. But actually, I'm going to take that and go, not with a homer pick, a Southern California pick, a nice bacon wrapped hot dog, Tijuana style. You know what I mean? It has to be from a cart on the sidewalk where you don't know how it got there, and they're probably handling money while they're handling your food. But then you have the grilled onions and peppers on it. You put some of you put, who cares? You put mustard and ketchup on there. And it is like a piece of heaven. I remember when I was an undergrad, we walked by these things on the way to the Coliseum every time, and I'd be like, oh, it's like daring each other to eat, no one ate it. And we'd see people eating, and you're like, oh, they're gonna get sick. Then one day, one of us would give in and get it, and you're like, the world changes, and you're like, I will never not get another one. I will never skip this again. I'm getting one of these on the way in and on the way out. Damn it, if they're out there, like these are the best. So that the danger dogs, I think, is what the youth call it now around USC. But when I was there, they were basically the same thing. Yeah,
still around. I'll tell you, it blows me away. You walk out of Staples Center, you walk out of the Coliseum, you walk out of Bank California Stadium, wherever it is with LAFC. They're all over the place, and yet I always wonder. I always wonder, like, what different, like, why doesn't someone try to differentiate themselves? Like, I don't know, like, make your cart like more colorful or something. Like, how do you market when you have the exact same product right next to you? And it's like, no, go to my cart, don't go to their cart. It's a interesting look at capitalism for me. Number 9, tell me the number one piece of advice you give to someone that manages or leads a sports fan community on social, whether it's Reddit or not. But what's that piece of advice that kind of sticks with you as a moderator?
Build a team of people who you like and who you can work with and trust. And don't pick people who are afraid to argue with you. Don't pick people who, just because they're fun, they have to be competent. But don't be afraid to get help and to build a team to help you and build some structure into it. Because as you scale up, you're going to need to rely on these people. There's going to be stressful moments. And you want people who you can trust to do the right thing. And you want to enable them to do the right thing. I think that's really important, and I think be willing to accept criticism, be willing to know that and at the same time, sometimes you have to say like you're willing. You're not going to make everybody happy. You absolutely, actually, and that might be the bigger one too, in terms of not the internal side of the team running it, but just in terms of content management and dealing with the audience. You're never going to make everybody happy. You're always going to, for a chunk of them, seem like a mysterious villain that they can dislike. And that's always the nature of it. As I said, I moderated been an admin, like top level moderator of a smaller, but a very hostile and active website for 12 years before I went to RCFB. So I know exactly what it was like to be suddenly told, like, you're and writing things that no one could get away with on Reddit. So, you have to know that you just can't please everybody. So just be your best self. And, as long as you feel okay with it, that's good.
Oh, that's a great point. I mean, if you talk to like a Kirk Herbstreit or something, he's like, well, if both fan bases think I hate their team, then I'm probably doing a good job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last one for you. This is a quick one here. Tell me, we're heading towards a Big Two conference, it feels like, where it's just going to be the SEC, Big Ten, just control the world. But before that, tell me which college football conference lasts longer, the ACC or the Big 12? And then after you answer that, your bonus is just going to be tell us who your championship pick is for the season.
I think the Big 12. At this point, I was, a year and a half ago, I would have not said that at all. Or say even a year ago, I wouldn't have said that at all. But we knew when the Pac-12 lost USC and UCLA, and obviously the Big 10, part of the Big 12 was losing and bringing in new teams, that it was going to be a knife. I used to call it a knife fight between the two, conferences on who is going to survive. And the Big 12 won, and Brett Yormark is one of the brilliant minds. Like, I would love to interview him. He would never, I don't think he would do an AMA, but I would love to interview him on like a Twitter space, because I am an absolute fanboy of his. I was a fan of his when they hired him, and I listened to some of his interviews when he was with the Nets, like, that are online. I'm like, this guy sounds different. He sounds interesting. The steps that he started to do were interesting, but then the way he did that end run around the media deal was just chef's kiss. That is just like, I could not believe that. So Big 12 right now, because the ACC, no matter what they do, Florida State and Clemson want out. And they're debating about it. They did the math, and it ended up being too expensive even for them and their alumni base. But it's going to break apart, and it's going to be a feeding frenzy. I think Florida State and Clemson might be attractive, obviously, to the SEC. I think the Big Ten would be very interested in North Carolina, Virginia, Miami, possibly, because they're AA universities, and they would bring in new markets. So that's my thought on that one. Now, the champion at this point, I can't vote against Georgia, as crazy as it sounds, as a three-peat. I mean, they look good. Now, there are challengers right now. If I were to pick a Final Four, I'd have some toughness, because Michigan certainly deserves to be up there. Florida State looks strong. But then Texas and USC could both look like they could be in that Final Four, because sometimes that's the who's going to be in your college football playoff is a classic question. Next year it'll be hard. There's 12, but this year we're still got 4. Those 5 seem to be the leading ones. And the only thing I would even say about Georgia right now is we haven't really seen them play a team with much of a pulse. We're going to see a better example when they play South Carolina this week, but their first games were not against the strongest level of opponents, like UT Martin, and I forgot they played like a MAC team this past week. But yeah, Ball State. Yeah, so we'll see how they do against South Carolina, which also isn't that great, but they're going to also see a really good quarterback on that other end. He is Spencer Rattler is put up some great numbers. I mean, he had a 90% completion rating, I want to say, last game. Again, not the greatest opponent, but still, that's hard to do against anybody. So he's not the He's the reason that they necessarily lost lost the game at the opener. So I'm curious to see how they do. Michigan looks strong, and yeah, we'll see how they are. Sorry, I can keep blathering on that. I'm so, as I kind of hit the Twitter spaces sometimes on Tuesday night, so I've gotten very good at vamping and filling time on a particular subject while I'm waiting to get a caller up to talk.
No, that's a whole other thing that we didn't get to hit on too. Is the Twitter spaces you guys do? They're kind of like what I think Twitter wanted spaces to be, which is kind of like a new age radio show, like where your callers are there already. It's a really interesting thing that we can touch on. And again, we got to do a part 2, Bobak. But now your chance to take over the podcast. For me, tell us your social media all-star followers. Tell us who they are, what platform they're on, and why they're following.
Yeah. Oh, so the ones I would follow, I love Brett McMurphy. He's a writer. He's been at various sites. He started at ESPN, where he started before that. He actually was, I think, at the Tampa Bay Times. But he is always one of those guys that gets real scoops in college sports. Nicole Auerbach from The Athletic. She's one I like. Really, just about anyone from The Athletic at this point. they've hemorrhaged so many people that the ones that are left are still excellent, though. I mean, they're really top flight writers across the board. Bruce Feldman, of course, peerless, one of the peerless reporters, I think, out there. I always like doing that because in order to comment on what's going on, you need to know what's going on. So we as we talked about, we like to riff on things. If you want to riff on things, you have to be on. Yeah, it's great to know it as soon as it's happening. And also, if you like a more nuanced sense of what's actually going on in the legal things that come up in college football, because there's lots of things that involve the law. Michael McCann, who is a professor at the University of New Hampshire's law school, but he's also he used to write for SI for many years. Now he writes for Sportico. Sportico is a great journal for those who are into the business, but his legal writing is peerless. As a lawyer, I say that. Like, if I want to know what's really happening, and because I may not have the time to do all the legal research, I'll read what McCann is writing, because Professor McCann knows what he's talking about.
Those are some great calls there, and I follow all of them, so we're in a good spot. And then, I mean, I don't think we necessarily need to tell people, but in case they don't know where to go to find RCFB, where do they go to find RCFB on all presences?
Yeah, you got it. So on Reddit, you just have to do Reddit/r/RCFB, probably /CFB. Or if you really want to make it easy, we actually created a landing page because we have to operate so many things off the website. RedditCFB.com will put you on something that'll easily direct you right where you need to go. And then on Twitter, you can find us, or X, you can find us on RedditCFB. You can find us under the same thing on Instagram, and I think you can even find us on Threads before we gave up on it. I think we're keeping it, but we might make it work if they decide to make Threads a sports-friendly site. But that's where you can find us. I would say Twitter and on the website are still the best places to go.
Definitely check them out. Whether you're a college football fan or not, you will enjoy just seeing the way that the community flourishes, the fun commentary, the way the fans engage with each other. It's just so great to learn about what goes behind it all and the great work that you and your team of moderators do. And just kind of thank you for coming on the podcast today, Bobak.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
So great being able to chat with Bobak Hayeri, again, editor, moderator behind RCFB and the @RedditCFB Twitter account, also a little bit of Instagram as well. Just really appreciate him giving some of his time and knowledge and insight, so much good information about how things work on Reddit, how they go about engaging such an enormous, super engaged fan base. He's not lying. Just go to the RCFB and look at some of their game threads, thousands of comments almost immediately during and after games, especially on Saturdays or when big news breaks. An awesome place to be, and of course check out their Twitter platform as well, where they just post great commentary and looks and sort of curates the best of the subreddit. But without do it for this episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Thanks again for listening. I'm your host, Neil Horowitz. You can find me on Twitter, NJH287, also on LinkedIn, where I post more content. The website, where you can find every episode, as well as more content, is dsmsports.net. And of course, follow every episode. You can find every episode, and you can subscribe for more with the Digital Social Media Sports Podcast on your preferred podcast platform. Until next time, this is Neil Horowitz signing off for the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.